Welcome everyone to Haven of Horror. This is a little bit different than usual. Today we're just doing a pre-recorded review. We'll expect to see a lot more of these on the channel. But today we're talking about Oculus, a 2013 movie that is very hard to find if you just Google Oculus. Uh, as I
Gotta
found the
be
hard way,
specific.
I kept getting the stupid headset. I am subject. I have Robert over here and Noah or Torgo over here. But how are you guys doing tonight?
Doing
Pretty
pretty
good.
good. Pretty good. Ready
Whoa.
to talk about this movie.
Yeah, I did the responsible thing and I took notes.
Ooh,
No
fancy.
notes this time for me.
So I had seen this before, but only just recently. Um, our mutual friend and sometimes co-host Austin told me I should watch this, and I've been meaning to. I'm a big Flanagan fan. I don't think I've seen anything of his that he was like heavily involved in that I disliked. But this was your first guys' first viewing, right?
Yes.
All right, Robert, what did you think of Oculus? And give us a plot synopsis. Brief
I
plot synopsis.
Heavily detailed and long.
there's an evil mirror. The end. That's my plot.
There you go.
synopsis.
Okay. That works.
No, it's a very well made movie, very well acted, great editing. I think the editing's a standout of it. It's about this family who these kids were orphaned, and one of them had to go to a mental institution because he thinks the mirror was evil and caused all these problems. But his sister is like, no, that totally happened, and I'm gonna prove that this happened. So it's this cool blend of sort of like a Ghost Hunters type movie where this person, this like pragmatic, supposedly sane person, is like trying to prove like scientifically that this mirror is evil. Of course, she has all the evidence of the decades of evil, horrible things that's done, and the brother who just got out of this mental institution, it's like, I just want to go home. I don't want a part of this.
Yeah.
Seems like a bad idea because they're trying to prove, because she's trying to prove that like her parents weren't crazy, and that this mirror is evil and it caused horrible things to happen to them, and things go bad. It's not a great
Things
time.
happen. Yeah.
It's a down. It's kind of a downer horror movie, but very dark, very disturbing, and I really enjoyed it. It's a very well made movie.
Yeah, I like that we have two siblings. One is obsessed almost with proving that this mirror was the downfall of her family, and then you have the brother, who more recently played Dick Grayson on Titans.
Correct.
Is like, no, like none of that really happened, and he's kind of made his own memories. And I find it interesting that a lot of this movie is just them in a room debating what really happened, to the point where I'm not sure I know what really happened. Like,
Yes.
I think obviously something supernatural happened, but this is such an unreliable narrator piece that I have a hard time separating the truth from each of their stories. But before we go too much further, Noah, what did you think of Oculus? And I like how he got that like deer in the headlights look when I said Noah. He was like, "Oh shit."
um, I really liked it. This was my first time watching, as we said before. I don't have a lot of experience with Mike Flanagan, which is why I'm excited to do this series that we're starting to embark on with this episode. Um, I had only seen Doctor Sleep. That was the only Flanagan thing I've seen up until this point. But I remember seeing ads for this movie when it came out, and I just never got around to watching it. But I thought it looked kind of cool. I was like, oh, it's this horror movie with Amy from Doctor Who. That's interesting. Um, but yeah, no, it's a pretty solid movie. I like that what we just talked about. There's two siblings, and you kind of see their two different perspectives. Um, and like there's like this struggle of, is it actually a supernatural thing, or are they both just kind of traumatized and going crazy? Um, you don't it doesn't really play like that for a long time. It's very definitively supernatural by the end, I think. But I kind of wish there was a little bit more of that kind of debate, and like I wish it was a little bit more up in the air whether or not it was supernatural or not. And in that way, it kind of reminded me of The Shining a lot. Uh, and with that aspect and the whole dad, because
Yes.
the dad is kind of like an abusive dad, but is that because he's a bad dad and he's overworked, or is it because he's possessed by the mirror? So I just thought that was an interesting connection, especially because he goes on to direct Doctor Sleep.
Sure.
But yeah. But overall, I thought it was pretty solid.
I agree that it's undeniably supernatural by the end, but I think there's an argument to be made that we don't know how much was the mirror and how much was the brother's side of things. Um, and I think that's because we never get a straight answer. Every flashback after a certain point, and arguably throughout the whole movie, is from the kid's point of view and like what they remember happening. So there's clearly like Tim, the brother, has like filled in some gaps of his own. But I don't know if the sister's telling the truth either, or she's also filling in gaps and like trying to create a boogeyman because she can't accept the idea that her dad was a monster. And I think the biggest one is the dog. Like, did the mirror eat the dog? Because he's the movie is smart when in the future
Yeah.
or in the present tense when she has the hilariously just named dog.
Dog. Yeah.
There, the brother frees him before anything can happen. So it's questionable in the flashback, was the dog sick and had to be put down, or did the mirror eat it?
Yeah, and it's pretty believable in the aspect of it shows how people can remember something completely different ways. Like, I've had arguments with friends and my sister about like how different things went um, when we were younger. So it really plays on that aspect. So like you could buy that this is really just all in their head. But I think it's pretty definitively supernatural by the end. I think you're right that there is like a little bit of a debate with certain aspects of it, but it's pretty, it's pretty much not like a psychological thriller by the end of it.
I'd say it's got those elements, especially because that third act is constantly jumping back and forth, like with especially with the siblings. In one scene they're kids again, and then the next they're an adult. And there's a particular scene where the mother is like embracing Amy Pond, Karen Gillian's younger self, and if I remember correctly, that transitions directly into the ending.
Yes.
Yeah.
So like
I
it's
think
it's
so.
kind of messing with the timeline and like with their heads. And you get scenes like the brother not realizing that he wasn't outside anymore; he was back in the house. Um,
Mhm.
and how much control did that mirror have over them? Um,
But I wonder how much of it is the mirror just influencing their perspective or them like actually remembering something that actually happened. You know
yeah,
what I mean?
but exactly that's what I mean is there's no definitive answer in this film, which I think is one of the highlights, where it
Right.
just presents you with ideas and you can form your own opinion. But it's very much that unreliable narrator, and I don't think either of them are maybe telling the entire truth. Um, I think there's a truth in there somewhere, but we may never
I
know what
think
that is.
Yeah, I think somewhere in the middle is probably the truth. I think that they definitely both believe where they're coming from,
Yeah,
which is what makes it compelling.
yeah, and it helps that both of them are really good in the lead roles. But
Yeah,
I think Karen Gillian is amazing in this movie.
I think she's a little bit better than the brother. The brother's not terrible, but like he's got some lines where I'm like, could have had another take of that.
No, I definitely think she's better. She's better, and I think she's at the end of the day the more memorable of the two. But part of that is just I think Karen Gillian is fantastic in this movie.
Yeah.
I think he shines a little more when he gets more frustrated over the course of the movie, like when they have those more heated arguments of like, no, this is what happened to our dog. He was sick, and this is how it affected the plants. It wasn't the beer. Like those scenes, I thought he did really well when they're really like sparring with each other over
Mhm.
the past and what happened. I think that stuff's really good. And
Yeah.
as far as actors go, everyone's good. I think Katie Sackhoff was the standout for me because she has to do a lot. I thought,
Oh, yeah, she's
because
great.
I always knew she was in this movie. I always thought like, oh, she's just like the mom in a couple scenes who dies. Like, no, she has a really tragic arc. And it's
Uh,
so much more of this movie than I expected. So that was a surprise for me.
Well, and I was talking to Noah about this earlier, but a lot of this movie feels like a prototype for Hill House, which we'll get to in a few weeks. I know, especially the parent stuff. Like he perfects that in Hill House with Carla Gugino, I think is her name.
Yes.
Yeah, and it's fantastic. But did you guys notice this was a WWE production?
I
That
laughed
made
when
me
I saw
laugh.
the logo. Yeah, when I saw that logo at the beginning, I'm like, what?
So-
Are we gonna see
Yeah.
John Cena in this?
So it's funny because I must have seen a trailer for this because at the time I was still watching WWE, and then before I took like a very long hiatus, and they would advertise all these movies because they pumped out movies at the time, and it's interesting that this is one of them because I think this might be the best one I've seen, even though there's a couple that I like almost ironically. But it's just crazy to me that WWE, and this is the only WWE film I've ever seen with no wrestlers.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, when I watched this at first, I was like, are we gonna see like John Cena or The Rock pop up? Like,
Well, you
but,
couldn't see him. That was the point.
oh right, yeah. But yeah, this is such like a strange movie for them. I
Yeah.
almost thought that like I had the wrong movie at first. I was like, is this?
Well,
Yeah.
when you see the Blumhouse logo, it's like, oh,
Yeah.
that makes sense.
That was when I was
Like,
like, oh, yeah, I'm watching the right movie.
Yeah,
Remember
this
when
is what-
Blumhouse could like put out a banger like this, and they put out like
Yeah.
more schlock to kind of finance these, but then they put out these bangers and always
Yeah, this is
forgiven.
Yeah.
This is one of the good Blumhouse movies, and also like many low-budget horror films, there's also like 3 other studio logos at the front of this that I've never seen in any other movie, which is very common for smaller horror movies like this that just get as much money from different people as they can. The most hilarious recent example of that is Late Night with the Devil, which is great, but there's like 20 production logos at the start of
Oh
that movie,
no.
and it's really funny. It's like the first 10 minutes of the movie is just production logos. And
So,
this reminded me of that a little because there's like 3 that, of course, like aren't
Yeah.
super well known.
Yeah, when I finally watch that movie, I'll have to fast forward through that. Thanks for telling me.
I like how they handle a lot of the flashbacks. The only thing I found clunky about it is I think sometimes there isn't a great segue into the flashback, but usually there will be a good segue out of the flashback. I think that might have been something that this film could have improved a little bit upon, but all of the flashbacks are good. And I like that because this film is so short. I think it's only 100 minutes, something like that.
Yeah, I think so.
It's
yeah.
about an hour 45.
He has to kind of trim all that fat, so you only get the flashbacks that are important.
Mhm.
But they never feel like, oh, can we get back to like, the adult siblings? Because like I like the mom, like you said, she's really good in this movie. I find the dad to be interesting. The kids aren't terrible, surprisingly, for this kind of movie.
I thought they
No,
were
I thought-
pretty good.
Yeah, the girl especially.
Mhm.
She
she's
has to do a
fantastic.
lot of the heavy lifting.
Yeah, she
That's
has
the
definitely
older
has a
sister.
lot more to do than the brother.
And it's kind of this descent into madness, kind of like The Shining. Katie Sackhoff is really scary at the end, like when she's chasing those kids around, and
Yeah, I got Evil Dead Rise vibes near the end.
Well,
with,
it's
like,
funny
the
you
evil
s-
possessed mom and like the
It's-
comforting and stuff.
It's funny you said that because I was talking to Noah before we started this review. I was like, in certain shots, Katie Sackhoff kind of looks like the main female Deadite from Rise.
Yeah, from Rise. Yeah. Yeah. I didn't really think of that until you said something about it. And I was like, oh yeah, because as I was watching the movie, I was like, she's kind of reminding me of someone, and yeah, that's probably it. The Evil Dead Rise.
And I think what's interesting too is it kind of subverts that Shining expectation, because yes, by the end the dad does become kind of a monster, but it's the mom that it takes first, and that's the slow burn.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's just great. the one great things about this movie is when it starts, like, okay, we know there's a tragedy, we know their parents are dead. You have kind of an idea of how that played out, and then they keep stretching it and pulling it throughout the movie. And like the more you see, the more you realize, oh, this is more complicated and not exactly what I was expecting how this played out than just, oh, their dad went crazy and killed their mom and then died. Like it's a lot more nuanced. There's a lot more weird stuff, and then you get like that friction with them. That stuff's great. With their marriage falling apart, it's like just get out of this house.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The house is evil.
Well, and it's sad because yeah, it is a very much a less of a like, oh, this person is just instantly a monster, and more of like these little things that keep building and building, and hearing things. So there's no way to for the protagonist to know, oh, something's going on. It's just, oh, things are difficult. We're fighting.
Yeah.
And like you get those little things like the kids mentioning they see a woman in his office, who by the way is Mike Flanagan's wife in the brief flashback.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, he's the horror director that has his wife in things, but she can actually act. So, and then with the kids, mentioning the woman, it kind of sets up that the wife thinks that her husband is cheating on her, and then it builds from that. She thinks there's intruders. She's hearing the dog all the time at night. To finally locking the dog in the office, and then either it was sick and died, or it disappeared. I don't know which one actually happened. I hope it's the mirror ate it. That'd be funny.
I like that they played ambiguous with that. And like I was saying earlier, I do wish they leaned more into the ambiguity of whether or not the mirror is actually evil or they're just crazy. But I still like that there aren't any definitive answers in the movie. Like nothing's like spelled out for the audience. It doesn't hold your hand.
Mm-hmm.
It just presents what happens in the film, and it's up to the audience to create an interpretation or just to take it as it is, as a horror film.
And Noah, we've joked many a times about horror movies that are about trauma. But this is a horror movie about trauma where it's actually good.
And it's part of the horror. It's part of the like conflict of the movie.
Yeah, what's scary is how they're dealing with that trauma and that that obsession and all of that kind of spirals. And it makes me wonder what happened to Mike Flanagan, because like I said, Hill House is like the same thing. Who hurt you, man? It's okay.
Yeah, I think in comparison, his movie Hush, like that, I think probably has more of a happy ending than this does.
Oh wow!
And I don't even remember how the movie ends, but that's also a much simpler movie from what I remember.
Yes, that's a home invasion thriller, but very good. I don't know if you can access it or if that's still gone to time, because that was a Netflix movie that was removed from Netflix. I don't know if that's available anywhere currently, but I remember really liking it. That's the one I always like forget is a Mike Flanagan movie. Like, oh right, because I just think of Doctor Sleep and his later stuff. Hush is the one I always forget about. I'm like, oh, that movie's also really
and the lead in Hush is also his wife. Let's see. I really like one thing I really like about this movie is how detailed Flanagan is with the history of this mirror. Like he has Amy Pond like going back to what, like the 1800s, and like she's tracked this mirror throughout time, and it's like, wow, like you really put a lot of time into this. You don't see that very often in these low budget like Blumhouse movies.
That's probably the scene where it gets the most like exposition-y and like explaining things to the audience, but it doesn't explain too much, and it's only like like just correlation, like that this murder happened around where the mirror was, blah blah blah, same kind of thing. And it also is just, it's a good scene for her character because it just shows you how like dedicated and kind of obsessed she is with like taking this thing down.
It is character development through exposition, which I find a lot of people struggle with.
Yeah, and she comes off more insane than her brother does. Like, she's just messed up from this event in such a different way. And I love that just like rundown of all these horrible things that happen weird. But what they avoid that's smart is you don't get an origin, you don't get like a curse that was put on it, or it's actually spirit of this guy. It's just like, no, like this is the date it goes back to, and there are like all these horrible things that have happened since. They don't overly convolute the actual, or it's like Christine. It's like you get enough. It's just this thing has a personality, supposedly. Got it.
Right.
Like we don't need to overcomplicate that.
Yeah, I think a lesser movie would go into detail about the actual origin of the mirror and like where it came from. It's like some sort of like cosmic horror or whatever. This movie is just like, no, like it gives you what you need. And like we were just saying, it's more in service of showing how obsessed she is to take this thing down.
And then her brother has that great rebuttal where he's like, okay, well, you have like, what, 200 years, 300 years or something? And it's like, so there's like these 12 to 15 horrible things that have happened. And then you're just ignoring like the decades of nothing between it. You're just cherry picking like these horrible tragedies and saying, see, it was the mirror. Like that sounds kind of crazy. That sounds
really
implausible
makes...
when you hear that rebuttal. It's a good back and forth.
It really makes you sad that in a way she didn't get the same help he did. And I wonder if that's kind of also like commentary on how we deal with child trauma. Like the boy did something, so he has to have help, but the girl didn't really do anything, so she's surely fine, right? This will have no lasting damage 20 years later.
Yeah, it's never talked about, but I would have assumed that she would had to have gone to therapy or like had.
It doesn't play that way to me.
It doesn't, and I don't think she did. But you would have thought, a kid going through such trauma would have to have gone to therapy.
But I also don't know if you'd lock a boy away. I also don't know if you'd lock a boy away for shooting his dad when his dad was found guilty of what he was.
I mean, he was. I don't think he wasn't in prison or anything. He was.
But he was institutionalized. I don't know if you'd institutionalize a kid for that.
Well, it's because I see what you're saying, but he also was raving about the mirror, so that was the okay. He killed his dad in self-defense, but he's also really messed up.
But was he? Because if I remember correctly, but keep in mind I did just watch this, but I could have mixed. I could be mixing it up in my head. At the end, when they're taking him away, it's only the adult one that's raving about the mirror.
No, the kid does too.
Does the kid? Okay.
Yeah.
That's a great parallel, by the way.
It's a great ending. Yeah.
No, and I think that is the only way this can end is in a horror film, the character with the obsession has to die for that obsession. But what I also like is the mirror wins. At the end of the day, if you go with the theory that this mirror is alive and evil, the mirror won.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a downer, and it's not my favorite type of horror ending, but I mean, it works, it earns it. But yeah, this is a downer movie. This is not for like if you want just a horror movie that is trying to disturb you and not give you any catharsis, like this is one, and it earns it. Like it does it well. There is a thing set up very early on for her trap with the mirror where it's a little predictable where somebody's getting killed by that thing. But they do a good job messing with your expectations where at like the start of the third act, like they do present that as a threat, like, oh no, this might happen. So it does psych you out successfully, I think, instead of just being like, didn't see this coming. Like, yeah, like you set this up an hour and a half ago. Like, no, they do a good job messing with where you think this is gonna go.
I think even if you see like, oh, clearly somebody has to die with that thing, that's why we set it up. I don't think anyone could predict that's the ending.
Yeah, usually in a movie like this, you would still like somehow the mirror would be destroyed and it'd be kind of bittersweet. Like, no, this is just a downer ending.
No, and that's what I really like about this movie, because I find that nearly enough horror movies don't have the balls to do this. And so, like young director, because this has got to be early in his filmmaking career, if I'm thinking correctly, to have the balls to do something like that, it's like, whoa. Yeah,
it's not a crowd pleaser.
Yeah, no, it's not. No. I'm really, really curious to see what general like consensus was at the time.
Yeah, reviews were very good. This is one of those early movies where I remember when I was like getting into the YouTube space, like watching other film reviewers, and like a lot of people were talking about this movie and speaking very highly of it. It's just one I didn't get around to at the time.
Yeah.
But this also feels like the movie, like a type of movie that's very uncompromised, where it's like this could easily be edited into a PG-13 movie. Like there's not a lot of
Oh
language,
yeah.
not a ton of gore, but there is just enough, and the gore that's in the movie is earned. It just feels
Is
like no, it's
yeah.
just the rating it has to be. They just made the movie they wanted to make. Like a studio could have shaved this down to a PG-13 for wider appeal if they wanted to, but the fact that we have it as is, I think, is great. And
I'm
it's
gonna
so
be
well
honest.
done.
Until you
they
said it,
didn't do that.
I didn't even think about this being an R-rated movie.
Yeah, it's not a hard
it's-
R.
Yeah.
Because there isn't a whole lot of gore, and the gore that is in there it's really effective.
Oh.
You know?
Mm.
Speaking
there's
of effective,
the light bulb scene.
yes, it
Yeah.
makes me shudder every time.
It's
Did you guys
really
see that
cringe
coming at
inducing.
all?
No, I didn't think about it.
Wait, are we talking about the Apple scene with the
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I saw it coming. I was like, oh no, I was dreading it. I saw it coming, but in a good way.
Oh man, it. Even though I knew it was coming, when I heard that glass crunch, I was like, oh god. Oh.
Well, and it's also kind of a fake out because just kidding, that didn't happen. But this is a movie that earns that fake out because there's a lot of moments like that in the third act, so it doesn't feel cheap.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel like it's cheap. Like, oh, we just wanted to do this gag, but then not commit to it. It like no plays with your thinking. Like maybe she's just insane. Like we don't know.
Flanagan,
Yeah, it's
Flanagan
very
is very good at making everything matter. Even in his Netflix shows, which are like 8 to 10 hours, I never feel like he's just messing, like doing something for the sake of doing it. We're gonna do this because of this, or because of this, which I think is one of his strengths as a filmmaker. Even though I think some of his, at the time, inexperience shows. Noah can probably talk about this more than I can, but I think this is a very flat looking film for the most part. There's not any shots that kind of jump out at me.
I think it looks good for what it is, and for an early. This is only his second movie, I guess. For an early director, like from what I've seen of his later work, you can tell that he improves vastly as a director.
By no means am I complaining. I think it looks fine. I don't need a bunch of fancy cinematography and shots like, oh my god, I can't believe he's holding the camera this way.
Right. No, but for the most part, like conversation scenes are just kind of filmed in a standard way, and he points the camera where it needs to be, and it doesn't look bland or anything, but it's serviceable.
It gets the job done.
Right.
Robert, did you have any thoughts on the film, on the cinematography?
Yeah, it's not an overly stylized movie. It's very competently made. Like you guys are saying, not a ton of jump scares. Appreciate that.
No. Yeah.
It's a movie built on tension, and I think the tension works. But then you compare this to something like Doctor Sleep, which I have seen, and just filmmaking wise, just like 10 times better. Like there are so many shots in that movie that stuck with me after that. Like, wow, that's just a really impressively made movie. A lot of good camera work in that. This very well made. Like totally works, totally effective. The light bulb scene, which we were talking about a minute ago, that's a scene that did remind me of that gave me Poltergeist vibes, where there's that iconic scene with the guy ripping off his face. It's super messed up. And then, just kidding, that didn't actually happen. So I got shades of that. I got shades of Evil Dead with like the mom. We were talking about The Shining, obviously. There's a lot of that, but it does a good job at still making it feel like its own thing. I never, even though that one scene reminded me of Poltergeist, I never felt like this movie succumbed to, now it's just doing this scene from that movie. Like it did a good job mixing and kind of making everything its own. The closest it gets to that is just some of the dad stuff, but I still think it totally works.
Okay, so two things that I want to mention before we move on to the more of the film. So there is one WWE reference in here, and I'm kicking myself for missing it. That when at the auction scene when she's buying the mirror, they reference that they found it in the Levesque house. Triple H's real name is Paul Levesque. I can't believe I missed that. But this is based on a short film from his earlier in his career in like 2005 called Oculus Chapter 3, The Man with the Plan. which is in that one it's just a guy in a mirror because obviously it's like a real low budget short film. And he was kind of inspired by things like Lovecraft. So it's funny that somebody mentioned that in a lesser movie it would be like a Lovecraftian being trapped in the mirror because he's looking at that stuff. And this movie was made for $5 million and made back $44 million. I'm really surprised Blumhouse didn't whore this out for a bunch of sequels.
Yeah. Yeah, you'd think we'd see like Oculus 5 by now.
Yeah. The only thing we've gotten is a Bollywood remake called Dobra See Your Evil.
See Your Evil. Okay. When are we reviewing that?
Never. So this took 3 weeks to film.
Oh wow.
Yeah, no, that's impressive. But I mean, I guess that makes sense. Like, this is an effect-heavy movie.
It's a small movie, yeah. Yeah.
No, but there is like a lot of redressing you have to do with that set to distinguish like the house from a decade ago to the present day. It's like there's still a lot of complicated things going on. So like I still think that's pretty impressive.
Mm-hmm.
So one thing we didn't mention that we should rewind to is more with when this movie starts to kind of distort reality for its protagonist and arguably for the viewer. Haley stabs who she thinks it's her mom. She's like thinks she's stabbing her mom. And then it turns out to be her fiance, and then the fiance calls her.
Yeah, and you're just like, what?
So the only complaint that I have now that you've mentioned it is I think maybe you should have cut there when he calls, but it lingers there to like try to confirm that he's dead. Do you think it lingers too far, or would you have left it as it is?
I think I would have left it as it is. I think it works.
Okay. I don't mind it the way it is, but I got to thinking because you said you would prefer more ambiguity, and I think maybe cutting that scene right after where he like shines the light on the plate to try to prove that it really happened. It's like, did it happen? Didn't it happen? But it's pretty definitive that he's dead.
No, that's a good point. Yeah.
Well, that's a question I had though, because when you get to the epilogue of the movie, I don't remember seeing his dead body. Like when the police are there, like I could have missed it, but I wondered like, should we have been more explicit about that, or were we keeping that ambiguous deliberately? Because I'm still not 100% sure he was even in that house, but I don't know.
Like I don't remember seeing him, but they only really flashed on her body, I think, just to show like what the brother did, because that's a much more important death for the narrative than the fiance.
But then I mean that still like makes me think like, okay, if the fiance is dead, like can they prove that she's the one that killed him? Like there's so many questions.
They would have to, because they would
of that,
because the plate's still there.
Yeah.
And so, I would assume her fingerprints would be in the system.
Yeah, well, but the way the movie's framed, it's like, oh, the brother's crazy, like he's getting locked away. So I don't know. It's not a criticism. It was just something I was thinking about. Like, what is the aftermath of this if that fiance?
Well, that's why they needed to make like 3 more sequels.
Yeah, exactly. And
the brother becomes a sequel, and by the 3rd one, the brother becomes the mirror.
Well, so that's stupid. We get the prequel where I'm like, what's this mirror's deal, man? Like, who hurt you? Like, this mirror is so mean and evil.
It's just pure evil.
You don't get it in origin. It's like, why?
My only question with the mirror, and I think this is something that I would have liked to see explained because it's in the movie. Who is that woman that's chasing them?
Previous victim.
Is it though?
Yeah, because you see that all of the victims kind of become like ghost creatures.
Oh, that's true. Okay, yes. Now that works.
I assume she's the one who, like, Flanagan's wife, who was like the one who like seduced the father, who was first talking to him and drawn him in. Like that's the implication I got.
So he was.
You're right.
With a ghost.
He was having an affair
with a ghost. About the mirror, though, I I do. We were kind of talking about this earlier, but I do think it makes sense that this movie has more of a downer ending because
Mm-hmm.
it wouldn't really make sense any other way, just with how powerful this mirror is. And I like that this mirror is like it is established to be very hard to kill, and it outsmarts them like every step of the way in the movie. Like no matter how, no matter what they do, um, it outsmarts them.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
if I'm gonna nitpick, like you could have tried harder to destroy it earlier on. Like there's just a couple attempts, and it's like, see, the mirror didn't let you do it. And also, the brother does bring up a good point where, like, if they do just destroy this mirror at the start of this movie, then she's gonna be in a lot of trouble for that
Right.
with the law. And it's gonna owe a lot of money. So you get there's enough of an in-universe justification, but they do show like a couple of times where they do try to destroy it. It doesn't work out for them just because this thing is so powerful with the way it just warps reality and people's perceptions. And I love that detail though of the crack in the mirror. Like they were able to change it a little bit through their experience when they were kids. So it's just like without getting too silly, you could just read into it of like this mirror probably has extra, even more of a grudge and a vendetta against these people, but also gives her that extra
Yeah.
overconfidence. Like we know it's vulnerable. If it bleeds, we can kill it.
Yeah.
And it's bleeding. So I think that
the,
detail's great.
it's a lot like the shark in Jaws 4: The Revenge. It wants revenge.
I like how Robert just turned it into a Predator review for a second. If it bleeds, we can kill it.
We can kill
Yeah,
it.
exactly.
Well,
Yeah.
gents, do you have anything else you want to talk about before we move into final thoughts?
I do want to finish my quick thought.
Oh, sorry.
I like that the main characters aren't stupid. Like they're questioning the brothers questioning everything along the way, and you see that Kaylee has obviously done her research into the mirror, and she's like hell bent on killing it. So it's not a matter of the mirror is just so powerful, and the main characters are obviously it beats them because the main characters are just too stupid to figure anything out. Like they're trying to outsmart the mirror, but it doesn't work for them in the end. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, no, I think that's Flanagan's strong suit, and across his work, is the characters and getting invested in them. Because even with the low budget, this is basically a glorified one room drama with some jump scares, or, some tension. Um, you're always invested in these two siblings because their story is compelling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and I think that's what draws me to him. Because I would say he's my favorite modern horror director because he's the only one that seems to get it. You can't scare people unless they care about the characters that you're putting through this torment.
right.
Not to say there aren't other good horror directors, but still.
Well, I don't think these characters are like the most three-dimensional ever, but the actors are bringing a lot to it. And her drive, her commitment, like it is.
It's all about power. It's
really
all about drive.
Hey, The Rock's not in this movie. We already said.
Oh. No, I'm not saying that they're the most like three-dimensional. I just mean throughout his work, and he improves, I think, with every piece that he comes out with. But even in this movie, like they're compelling enough to keep you watching.
Right. Like I still care about these two, even though I do kind of agree. Like they're not the most fleshed out, but I know enough to care about them.
Mike Flanagan for a Friday the 13th movie, folks. Let's do
it. That'd be the best Friday the 13th movie.
That's true. Robert, do you have anything else you want to talk about before we move into final thoughts?
I think we covered most of it. Like we were just saying, like this could have so easily been just a boring family moves into a house and there's an evil mirror and the parents aren't like. It's so shocking that this doesn't fall into that trope really of like the kids think the mirror is evil and the adults aren't listening to them. Like it could have so easily gone to that place, and like it doesn't really. At least not until the kids are adults themselves and are, she's trying to prove that it's evil. But I found that interesting, Where this could have so easily been a movie where it's like, Mom, the mirror's possessing Dad. It's like, yeah, no, it's not.
Yeah.
Well,
It's
I love
almost
how it
more.
avoids a lot of those tropes.
It's almost more realistic in that way, where you
Mhm.
wouldn't expect there to be an evil mirror in the
Mhm.
house that you just moved into. So it just plays out in that really tragic way.
Yeah, because even like though clearly over a period of time the family knows that there's something like wrong going on, they can't like pinpoint the mirror specifically, until it's too
Yeah.
late, and then the kids know like it's the freaking mirror.
Right.
Yeah, that stuff's great. If talking about scenes that like just make me wince, like the light bulb scene, I I think what bothers me on a physical level more than eye stuff or glass or whatever, it's always fingernail stuff. And there's that
Right.
scene early on when the dad's
Yeah.
like digging out his finger, I'm like,
I was
stop
going to mention
it.
that earlier. Yeah, that was the other. The two big things that made me cringe were obviously the light bulb and then the fingernail stuff with the dad.
And to
Yeah.
the movie's credit, that's part of the reason why where you're not immediately sure that the light bulb thing is a fake out, is because we know that the stuff with the fingernails isn't. Like we see his bloody hands, like it
Yeah.
just gets worse and worse. So
Mhm.
like that stuff we know is real to some capacity. So the movie does a really good job of presenting you
Yeah.
with things that seem to be real and then just messing with your head. And like I said before, the editing's just so good, especially in the third act, just the seamless cutting back and forth with the kids, like just the geography and the staging of that just must have been a nightmare. Where it's
It's
just
yeah.
in one shot, it's this adult and this kid, and then it's this kid and this adult going in and out of rooms, and like, no, it's really good stuff. Very well made movie. I liked it a lot. I recommend it. Like I said, this isn't for everyone. If you don't like just grim, disturbing, downer horror movies, this is not for you.
No.
It's also been a slow burn. So if you like fast paced with like nonstop gore fest, this also isn't for you. Like this is a psychological kind of a slow burn, but I think very cool and investing movie. I thought it was very well done.
Robert just like gave an entire 40-minute review in 2 seconds.
He was timed.
That's right.
Yeah. So I'm gonna count that as your final thoughts, because good lord.
Yeah, no, that's right.
Noah, final
Wait.
thoughts.
I mean,
Noah keeps having this like deer in the headlights look. Like every time I say his name,
he's calling on me.
Stop talking to me.
I'm just gonna echo a lot of what Robert just said. Yeah, I love the atmosphere of this movie. I love that it's more of like a downer, and I think it makes a lot of sense that it's a downer with the threat that they're going up against. I like that the characters are smart and not stupid, even though I do enjoy a lot of horror movies with stupid characters. I think a lot of the best ones, or a lot of my favorite at least, are ones that I can actually like latch on to the characters and root for them. But yeah, and if you like any of that, if you like movies that are just filled with nothing but despair, you're gonna enjoy this movie.
despair.
And and if you've seen Mike Flanagan's later work, whether it be on Netflix or Doctor Sleep or anything, go check this out, because this is a lot of where that all began. So yeah, it's good.
It's good. I'm going to echo a lot of what has already, well, these two said, echo my thoughts. I'm just going to throw in that this is the best. This is one of the best Stephen King stories that Stephen King never wrote. And Mike Flanagan has that with a few of his works. And I think that's another reason that I'm drawn to his films is we never talked about like horror novels. I'd love to do more novel reviews on the channel at some point, but that's a true big commitment. But Stephen King is my favorite author, and I find Mike Flanagan a lot of times has that same sensibility, but knows how to translate it to film.
Mm-hmm.
Which is why I think he's perfect for Doctor Sleep, and he's doing the Dark Tower series, which I'm really excited for. Yeah, just check it out if you don't mind a dour ending. If dour endings aren't your thing, maybe go watch something else. It's not the end of the world. Um, I'm going to stick with my letterbox rating of 4 out of 5 stars based on our arbitrary rating system. Where are you guys at?
I think I'm right there with you at 4. I was going back and forth between
No, it's like 5
3.5.
stars, 5 stars.
No, not exactly. I mean, I like this movie, but I was going back and forth between 3.5 and 4. And I think after this discussion, I'm a little bit more positive on it. So yeah, it's very solid. 4 out of 5.
Roberto.
I'll give it a 4.
Roberto.
I'll give it a 4.25. I'll give it
Oh,
4.25
fuck off.
out of 5.
Wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's no. I thought you guys might go higher because we've been kind of gushing about this movie. It's very good, and to no fault of the movie's own, it's just one of those movies that I don't see having a lot of rewatch value to me. Like I know people I would show this to and would recommend it to. Like it's a movie I would watch again, but it's not something that would become like a yearly Halloween
Yeah.
tradition for me. You know, like it's very good, very well made. You know, got some gripes, got some nitpicks, but I like it a lot. But it's not quite a 5 out of 5. Like compared to something like Exorcist 3, which is also at times very depressing and very dark. That's also just really entertaining and still has a lot of replay value for me, where it's like that's just
Yes.
a favorite movie of mine. This is just a really good movie that's worth watching and revisiting once or twice. Like would
Right.
recommend it's a 4.25 for me. Like I like it a lot. I really
Well, I
respect
think-
this movie.
I think I agree with you on that, and I think that's a lot of the reason why I didn't go higher. It's just this is a movie that I think I appreciate more than I love,
Mhm.
or find really entertaining. But I did really like it, and I would absolutely recommend it.
So my thing is, and we haven't gotten there yet, so I'll be interested to kind of revisit some of this discussion after we've done Hill House in a few weeks. But like I said, in many ways, Hill House feels like this concept perfected. And that to me is a 5 out of 5. So I look at that versus this, and this is good, but it's not. He's not reached that level yet. I think, which can let me go higher on the score of the film.
And for an early movie, like this is a pretty damn good effort.
Yeah,
Yeah.
You know?
like imagine any other most directors coming up with like something this quality with their second movie and working with a studio
Yeah.
like Blumhouse.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
WWE.
Hey, WWE put out some bangers, okay? I don't know if you've ever seen Leprechaun Origins, but that's the best Leprechaun.
I think the other director off the top of my head I can think of who had like a banger second movie is John McTiernan with Predator. So
I think that's more common. Like, there's a lot of directors that have like a solid first outing and then just really hit their stride with their second movie. But yeah, it doesn't
True.
happen all the time.
Right, some directors take a bit longer to find their footing.
Yeah, but anyway, we will be doing a 2-movie commentary in 2 weeks from the time of recording. So that will be 2 weeks, the 17th. We'll be doing The Shining and Doctor Sleep. We will be doing the Doctor Sleep director's cut, so it'll be a massive like 5.5, 6-hour commentary. Thank you guys for watching. If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button and consider hitting the subscribe. And we'll see you guys next time.
See you.